I are going to talk about now is some recent sort of experimental work we've been doing in OpenCog aimed at putting together two OpenCog components, one that does probabilistic evolutionary program learning and one that does logical inference. So I'll give some general overview for a few minutes, then Nil will run through a practical example with the system, which is a sort of simple toy example. So we went over the basics of how OpenCog represents knowledge before as a sort of weighted labeled hypergraph, and the fact that OpenCog has a number of different cognitive algorithms operating on that hypergraph. Now, one of the sort of anti-patterns which has existed in the OpenCog universe for a while is, although our philosophy is based on synergetic interoperation of different cognitive processes, in fact, most of the work in the system has been some guy working on one cognitive process and doing something interesting with that, which is more for sociological reasons than anything else. If you have one researcher working on one algorithm, that's kind of the easiest thing for them to do, and get that algorithm to do more and more things. So both Moses as a probabilistic and heuristic evolutionary program learning algorithm and PLN, probabilistic logic networks, as a logical inference system, those have both been around for some time, like eight years or something, and we haven't actually used them together before. So Nil and I, together with Eddie Monroe and the Misgana, Bayetta and other colleagues, have been working on getting these to actually work together, and we've made some progress toward doing that now. And the basic method is Moses, as an evolutionary learning algorithm, learns little program trees. We import those program trees into the atom space as a bunch of semantic nodes and links. Then you apply PLN inference to do reasoning based on those program trees. And the payoff there comes if the features in the program trees are things that there's other knowledge about in the atom space. And then PLN can connect that program tree with a broader knowledge base. And then going further, which we haven't done yet, you can take conclusions derived by PLN working in the atom space and feed that back into Moses. So I actually started working on this out of some applied work we've been doing, applying Moses in the biology domain. So, for example, we have a population of flies that live 5 times as long as ordinary flies, because they were created that way by 30 years of experimental evolution. And we have the DNA from the long-lived flies and the normal flies. You apply Moses to find patterns in what distinguishes the DNA of long-lived flies from DNA of normal flies. And this is a narrow AI application. I mean, it's Moses applied to bioinformatics, which is very interesting from a bioinformatics point of view. And the reason you would want to use PLN on the Moses models there is because you have all these bio-ontologies. Like, you know what the different genes do, what categories they fall into, what proteins they code for, what pathologies they're involved in, and so forth. So then we do the same thing with human data. We're looking at DNA data from supercentenarians, like people lived 110 years or older, to figure out, like, what is it about their DNA that makes them live a long time? It's not usually just one gene, but there are combinations of genes, and Moses, by surveying a bunch of DNA data, can find the combinations of genes. So that's an example of a Moses model, which is a very simple program in this case. In this case, all we're doing is using it to learn Boolean and or not trees, basically, where the features are the presence or absence of a mutation or single nucleotide polymorphism in that gene in a certain individual. So that model is applied to a person. You see which of their genes has a SNP or a mutation in it. Then you see, is that Boolean formula true or false? That predicts whether they're going to live a long time or not. And that's kind of nice. I mean, we're going to publish that. But then for each of those genes, you know something about it. You know, like this gene is involved with apoptosis. This other gene is part of a certain signal transduction pathway. And then what you want to do is take a whole bunch of these Moses models and all the knowledge from these bio-ontologies or from biotext mining, and then abstract from the Moses models to derive conclusions. And I go through a fairly complex example in the paper, which I'm not going to try to review now because it would be too complicated. But this is an example of some of the actual knowledge you have. Like certain genes are in certain gene ontology categories. Like the gene TJP2 is an apoptotic process, apoptosis being pre-programmed cell death. Then you know certain gene ontology categories belong to other gene ontology categories. You may have knowledge that this gene is associated with longevity and not know why, just from text mining or something. And putting all those together, you can get general conclusions like, okay, models that combine the gene TJP2 with growth regulation genes are important and tend to promote longevity. Why is that interesting? Because then as a biologist, you can say, well, okay, what is that gene TJP2? What does it have to do with growth regulation genes? Why? I mean, right now, these results are more a stimulus to a human biologist to investigate and understand what's really going on. Or the models themselves could be used as diagnostics. But the point is, in this particular application, you can connect to your laptop now? Yeah. In this particular application, there's a big benefit to mining the complex data sets using Moses, which is really good at doing that, and then connecting those models with symbolic background knowledge, which was coded by humans. And this is a case where feeding hand-coded rules into an AI system is at least very productive in biological discovery. I mean, it's not AGI, but it's scalable pattern mining and scalable inference, because these are quite large added spaces. Well, I mean, you can get millions and tens of millions of nodes in there when you load in all these bio-ontologies. So I think it's interesting as a way to stress the OpenCog system to do cool stuff. And I think the Moses PLN integration that we're playing with in this bio-application context, that same integration of evolutionary learning and reasoning functionality can also be useful for AGI applications, even though this is more of a narrow AI application. So now, Nil is going to show a much simpler example of this same kind of thing, which has the benefit that it's easier to understand and you can run through it.
Yeah, so basically what I'm going to show is how you can, using background knowledge, improve the confidence of the models that you learn with raw data sets. So I'm going to...
Sorry.
No problem. So it's one way...
Yeah, we're implementing the AGI on a 1985 Atari video game just to prove how cool we are.
Yeah, so I'm just going to take a very simple data set. I'm going to learn a very simple program. And because the data set is small, but even when a data set is kind of large, I mean, as long as you've got a lot of features, you always have a lot of uncertainties about the fitness of your program. But the thing is that in that data set, there's usually features that are connected to other knowledge that you might have and that have a lot more confidence. And so that's what we're going to do. So first, I'm going to show you the data set in question. So it has just three features, three input features, one output feature, which is just like whether the recovery speed of some injury is fast or slow, given that you take some treatment or do something else like eat something, or it doesn't really matter. It's just to be simple. And so I'm going to apply Moses on that.
So that's a data set, and the idea is to use Moses to what is Moses trying to predict in that example?
So it's trying to predict Like, what is the recovery speed?
It's trying to predict the first column based on the other columns.
No, the last one.
It's trying to predict the last column
Yeah.
based on the first three columns.
Like, what is the recovery speed? The
Okay.
recovery speed if you take treatment 1, treatment 2, maybe both together,
Yeah.
or if you eat fruits and
Yeah.
vegetables.
So it's analogous to our biology examples where you're trying to predict is the fly long-lived or not based on the 25,000 DNA features. The difference is here you have 3 features instead of 25,000, so it's easier to show on the screen.
Okay,
and
so
runs faster.
so that's the Moses command. I'm not going to go into explaining that. So I'm getting this model. It's actually directly in the format that can be imported to the atom space. So now I'm going to, well, turns out I already had this in a file, so I'm just going to launch directly a guy, which is...
So the model is you take treatment 1 or you eat lots of fruits and vegetables,
Yeah.
and then you'll have a fast recovery time.
Yeah.
So the model, in that simple data set, the model to predict the last column was simply an OR of 2 other columns with 87.5% accuracy.
So I'm going to load the model. The model actually contains something which is missing in the output of Moses, which is the confidence. I'm not going to get into detail about, what this confidence exactly means, but basically it's a number between 0 and 1. 0 being that you have 0 knowledge actually about this number, the accuracy, 0.875. You actually have a distribution which is flat. You don't know anything. 1 being that you have just one single value. And so on such a data set, you can imagine that the confidence is pretty low.
5 more minutes.
5 more minutes, sure. Okay, now I'm going to load the background knowledge. Well, what is printed is just the last thing I've loaded in that file. I'm just going to quickly show you what there is in there. So we've got some general knowledge, like if individual X takes substance Y and Y contains Z, then individual X takes Z. We have more specific knowledge, like about, say, that if you take compound A, it's going to speed up the recovery, and so on and so on. We've got that, for instance, I'm skipping that. Okay. Now I'm going to load PLM. I guess I can show you a few PLM rules as well.
Yeah, sure.
That would be. So the rules are actually represented in the same formalism as the knowledge.
So this is an inference rule rather than a piece of background knowledge, right?
Yeah.
The other formulas he showed were some hand-coded background knowledge just for this toy example, whereas this is a logical inference rule which is always used by PLM. This is the basic term logic deduction rule, the sort of transitive reasoning.
Yeah. So, well, I'm not going to explain in details, but basically it's just deduction rule, but there's also a probability a formula associated to it. Because in fact, A involved B is actually the probability of B knowing A. You can imagine how probability fits in. And so, well, what I really wanted to show is actually the reasoning engine as it's working, but it's too buggy. We've been re-implementing that recently, and so I can't show you that, but I'm going to just apply the rules in the right order. Typically, what we would want to do is just take the model and ask our backward chainer to, from this model, connect the model to the background knowledge, and then change the confidence. But I mean, today I can't show you that. So I'm just going to apply the rules one by one. So that rule is a for rule. I mean, it just takes the for all statement and instantiate it with what it finds fits in the atom space. So, okay, I don't know how much time, 2 minutes. Right, so, I mean, you've got this thing. 2 minutes, I don't have time to enter into that kind of detail, sorry. I mean, I have other things to show you, so, I mean, basically those rules, they are just cleaning the stuff that we've just got, removing like the neutral elements, that is things which are always true, which we got from the background knowledge. You can eliminate other things. And so you end up with something which is, whoop, it's coming. Now a bit cleaner, which we can finally read, which says that if you take treatment 1, you take also compound A. Okay, so once I have this, I can start to derive other inferences. So just okay. So what do we have here? Basically, we just have that.
Oh, we have a lot of parentheses.
Yeah. So we have derived the inference that if you're well hydrated, you're more likely to recover fast. All right?
And what do we derive that from?
Oh, because, you know, fruits and vegetables contains a lot of water, so...
Okay, so the Moses model said eating fruits and vegetables helps you recover fast. The background knowledge says eating fruits and vegetables makes you well hydrated. So then by some deduction and then some formal rearrangement rules, you figure out that being well hydrated will make you recover.
Yeah, and the important thing is that you see the number, this number 0.6000. It's the confidence. I mean, the thing is that this knowledge can have a much higher confidence than the model itself, because you might have a much bigger data set. So that's the crux of the idea here, is that you use background knowledge and the increase of confidence you have on that to increase the confidence of your model. That is, you make up for a poor data set training and testing.
Yeah, we're out of time.
So now we've got, okay, I'm going to show just the last one, because that is really the last one. And here you've got actually the model.
And you increase the confidence.
So the confidence has increased. The accuracy has decreased, but for good reason. And yeah.
Right. So in general, what this illustrates is you can get a bunch of potential explanations of data out of Moses, which analyzes the data. Then you can see which of those makes more sense in the context of your background knowledge, and that will get its confidence boosted according to PLN semantics. Whereas in the example given in the paper, what PLN does is sort of derives new abstracted knowledge from a bunch of Moses models. And here, I mean, this was a toy example that was made to make it barely tractable to show during a short talk. The examples of relevance to biology, you're analyzing large data sets, then you're importing large bio-ontologies, but it's sort of the same processes. I mean, the hope and belief is that in the architecture, the same integration mode that's working on these bioinformatics examples can work on more AGI-ish examples where you have a system that's driven by its own motivations rather than a system that's being used as a data mining tool. It's really just a case study of getting the output of the evolutionary program running in a very simple case where it's running Boolean programs to feed into the logical inference engine. And that's, as you see here from Nils' demo, running a real system is always kind of a pain compared to theorizing and pontificating. And we're sort of still in the middle of getting all this to really work well. But it is doing something, applying PLN to the output of Moses, which is a long time coming. So we're happy about that.
Okay, let's thank the speakers.